We have something fun planned for today. As you know, we are currently in middle of the Torah portions that talk about the Exodus. We have the book of Exodus, Parsha Shmos, that details the descent of our nation, of our people, of the founding family of the Israelites into idolatry. They came down to Egypt and they were protected by Joseph, viceroy of Egypt, and they were celebrated. And then over time, there's a new pharaoh, there's a new regime, and they pose a threat. They're so numerous, they're so powerful. Let's find ways to subjugate them. There are special taxes instituted. They are forced to do back-breaking labor. There is government enforced infanticide. Things are really awful. And we meet Moshe. And Moshe is a tremendously powerful person, an inspired person, someone who's dedicated to the well-being and the improvement of his brethren. And he has a very unusual backstory. He's adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. And then when he stands up for his brethren, they want to kill him. He has to flee. He's in Midian, burning bush, go down to Egypt. He does. He tells Pharaoh, he demands from Pharaoh, release your Israelite slaves. Who's God? Why am I listening to them? I'm going to make it even worse. And then he comes back. And then we have the 10 plagues. And in this week's Parsha, Parshas Bo, we have the actual Exodus. After 10 plagues, and the last plague, the death of the firstborn, Pharaoh cries, "Uncle, leave!" He banishes them from his land, and the nation, the Israelite nation, leaves Egypt with an outstretched arm on the wings of eagles in great pomp and ceremony. The Exodus has occurred. Now, at the end of the Parsha, you have 2 paragraphs that talk about all sorts of different things, but they both end with a commandment to place these words upon your heart as a sign between your eyes. It's a reference to the tefillin. And there's a comment by the Ramban, Nachmanides. I think it's undisputed. It's his most famous comment in all of Torah. And when my grandfather spoke about this comment to his students, he said, everyone needs to learn this comment in the Ramban by heart. That's what he wrote. This comment is so foundational. The comment that the Ramban offers at the end of our Parsha to the section on the Torah section on tefillin, on the phylacteries, the boxes, the compartments, the scrolls upon your head, between your eyes, upon your arm, opposite your heart. It's so important, you have to know it by heart. And when you read it, you see why. Because it addresses many foundational and fundamental principles of our faith. And it's also, it addresses the heart of the matter. If you knew just this Ramban, you would know an entire framework of our faith. But it's also chock full of all these other amazing insights. For example, we know the Exodus plays such an important role in the story. I was thinking that if I wanted to tell the Exodus story, you could probably do it in 1 or 2 sentences. You could say, well, the nation was enslaved, and they were released after great miracles. But it's belabored, each one of the plagues, and the back and forth, and the dialogue. And Pharaoh's intransigence, and his heart becomes heavy and hard, and he's resistant, and he's compelled and forced by God to release the nation. And all the great miracles are detailed with such length that's not typical. And then the Exodus is revisited multiple times. Someone actually counted. How many times is the Exodus mentioned in the Torah? 61 times it's mentioned. And there's a commandment. One of the 613 commandments of the Torah is to not forget the Exodus. You must remember it. We're commanded to remember the Exodus twice a day. This is an event that happened more than 3,300 years ago. We think about like great events of human history. I don't know, the attack on Trenton, or General Washington's escape across the Hudson. We think of pivotal events that happened in American history, world history. No, like you know the events, but they're not part of your life. Here we're told an event that happened 3,300 years ago. That's a long time. We're commanded by God to remember it multiple times a day. Moreover, we have a 7-day festival where the whole festival, everything changes. Everything changes. And we're dedicated to immersion in this story. And we have to retell the story, not just to remember it, to tell it over. Oh, and then there's another 7-day festival, Sukkot, and it's also about the Exodus. And there's another festival, Shavuot, and it's also about the Exodus. And Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and even Shabbos. Every Shabbos, we declare this is a remembrance for the Exodus. And so many mitzvos orient around this event. Why is it so central? Why is it so indispensable? Why must we never forget it? It's a prohibition to forget the Exodus. That's an important question. But you could expand the question and say, well, why do we have mitzvos to begin with? What's the purpose of mitzvos? And you can expand the question, well, what's the purpose of created existence? Why did the Almighty, who preceded the world, why did he create the world, the universe? These are all central questions, and all of them are addressed in this one comment. You read the comment, you're like, wow, so many things here, so important. This, if there were to be a comment in the Ramban to remember by heart, it will be this. So I think it's important at least once a year to revisit it. I told some of my students, I said, well, we have to learn this by heart. They're like, what? By heart? It's so long. It's not that long, and you could do it. It's not that hard. But certainly, we should have an appreciation about what we're about to study, because it is very foundational. So the parsha ends with 2 paragraphs found in the tefillin. Of course, if you look at the tefillin, the one on the head, it has 4 compartments. In each compartment, if you were to open it, not advisable, unless you're a professional. Since I got my pair of tefillin before I was bar mitzvah, it's already some time ago. I had it opened only once. You want to make sure that everything's good. These are scrolls, and God forbid they would be left outside in the sun; they could melt. I had it opened once by a professional, and he told me it was one of the nicest pairs of tefillin he's ever seen in his life, and he's seen thousands. He says one of the top 2. He told me top 2 or top 5. That's what he told me, which made me very happy. But you don't open it. But if you were to open it, you'll find in the one on the head, you'll find 4 compartments. In each compartment, there's a small little hole, a slit. And in that, there's a scroll. And you open up the scroll, and it has 2 paragraphs from our parsha. Right after the Exodus, there's these 2 paragraphs that talk about the tefillin and other things. And there's 2 more paragraphs from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, chapter 6 and 11, the first and the second paragraphs of the Shema. And there's obviously some sort of connection between the Exodus and the tefillin. And that's the Ramban's kind of initial question. Why is the law of the tefillin and the paragraphs that are instructing about the tefillin and are included in the tefillin, why is it placed right after the Exodus? Like the first thing we're told after the Exodus is this. So he tells us that the root of this mitzvah is that we should write down about the Exodus on a scroll and place it on our head and place it on our arm, because the head, that's near the brain, obviously, and the arm, it's opposite the heart. And that's the seat of our thought, of our intelligence, of our mind, of our emotions. And we have to place the Exodus and a recounting of the Exodus and a reference to the Exodus as an adornment on our arm and on our head, because this event is so pivotal, it must always be resting upon our heart and upon our brain. And then he tells us, well, there's two more paragraphs. And if you look at those paragraphs, the Shema talks about one God, to believe in one God and to remember all the mitzvos, and to love God and to fear God and to study His Torah and to place the Torah upon your heart and to believe in the concept of reward and punishment, where our actions, they determine the way God treats us. These are all fundamental principles of our faith. So that, together with the Exodus, is placed upon our head and upon our heart. That's the purpose of this mitzvah. That's kind of related to our subject, but then the Ramban expands it. This is why this comment is very famous. If this comment just talked about the tefillin and what's the purpose of the tefillin, what's the root of the tefillin, it would be a very noteworthy comment. But after Ramban talks about tefillin, he expands the aperture and gives this incredible essay. And he starts off like this. And now I will tell you a principle that is the reason behind many mitzvos. Like if you think like the Ramban, the holy Ramban, the greatest Jew of his era, one of the great titans of our history. He's like, I'm going to tell you something. You pay attention. Your ears perk up. What's the Ramban going to tell us? A reason behind many mitzvos. And he tells us, in the times of Enosh, grandson of Adam, something terrible happened. Idolatry. That's when idolatry gained its first foothold in the world. And ever since then, there are all sorts of corruptions in faith. Now, I read the sentence many times, and I just noticed today something very interesting about what he's saying. We think of idolatry being a byproduct of heresy. Why are you genuflecting to this idol? Well, because I believe in its power. The Ramban says the opposite. It's not that idolatry is the result of heresy. It's actually the cause of heresy. People wanted to do idolatry, and then they justified that with all sorts of different types of heresy. It's a little side point, a little sidebar. But he's talking about the introduction of idolatry to the world in the times of Enosh. And with idolatry came all sorts of corruptions of faith. And they come in all sorts of different flavors. We could call it the flavors of heresy. There's different flavors. Some of them say, well, the world's been around forever. In the rabbinic literature, this is known as Olam Kadmon. The world is preceding. Turtles all the way down. That's the most intense version of idolatry. God doesn't exist. There's no creator. Well, how did the world come into being? Well, the world always was. That's one flavor of heresy. And then there's a different flavor of heresy. Sure, of course, there is a creator. But he doesn't know what's happening. He's not aware of what's happening. We're kind of on our own. He moved on to other things. What I do inside, he doesn't know. He's not aware of. And therefore, if I do something, God is unaware of my actions. And it's another flavor of heresy. And then there's a third flavor of heresy. God certainly exists and he knows everything, but he doesn't care. It's not important to him. He doesn't oversee us. We're like fish. Fish, we don't know what the fish actually do. When you go fishing, you find a fish, you find it flapping a little bit. But no one really knows what's going on with the fish. They're hidden. They're underneath the water. No one sees them. No one really thinks too much about them. Humans, we're like fish. God doesn't really care at all about what we do. And therefore, there's an important component in that element of heresy. If God doesn't care, so to speak, what people do, there's no oversight, and there's no consequences. The idea of reward and punishment, we do good, we get good. We do bad, we get bad. That is predicated upon God caring. And God said, okay, you want to do good? I will reward you. You want to do bad? I will punish you. Reward and punishment is contingent upon this element of faith. And this flavor of heresy rejects reward and punishment. And there's a fourth flavor of heresy. Maybe God exists. Maybe he knows. Maybe he cares. But maybe he's impotent, God forbid. Who's to say he's all-powerful? He wants to punish. He wants the word. He can't. A fourth flavor of heresy. So this is kind of the introduction to the essay, that there was a time in history where there was no idolatry. And where there was no idolatry, there was no corruption in faith. And then idolatry came, and since then there's been all sorts of confusion, all sorts of different flavors of heresy. And the important principles, God exists, and he knows everything that happens, even what's invisible, even what's in your heart. Even if you're in a hermetically sealed environment and there's no cameras, God knows everything. And it matters. He has oversight. He cares. There's reward and punishment. And he is all-powerful. Those four components, over the course of time, there were challenges to it. There were quibbles with it. There were various elements of heresy. And then, when God is desirous of changing that, and God wants to have a people, or even an individual, to banish those false beliefs, there's a way to instantly dispel all heresy. And that's known as a miracle. What is a miracle? A miracle is a device that the Almighty can employ when he is desirous of employing it to instantly and totally and thoroughly dispel every single element of heresy. So the staff turns into a snake. Then the snake turns back into a staff. And then the staff of Aaron swallows the staff of all the necromancers and wise men of Egypt. And the water turns into blood, and the frogs overwhelm Egypt, and the lice, and the hordes of the animals, and the pestilence that targets every Egyptian-owned animal left outside, and doesn't touch a single Israelite-owned animal. That's a miracle. The boils, the hail, the locust, the darkness. For the Egyptian, total darkness. Suffocating darkness, paralyzing darkness. But for the Israelites, they have light in all their dwelling places. And at the stroke of midnight, every single firstborn, human and animal, of the Egyptians die. And amongst the Israelites, not even a dog is barking. And then there's the splitting of the sea. Amazing. The water turns into walkable, dry paths for the Israelites, and the waters come crashing down on the Egyptians. These are miracles. And what does a miracle do? What's the purpose of a miracle? A miracle is a device to dispel every part of heresy, every flavor of heresy. Because when you have a miracle, it proves that the world has a creator who is involved in the world. Once there's a miracle, it's not tenable anymore to say that the world doesn't have a God who oversees it, who can manipulate it at will. And the term that the Ramban uses for this is that there is a God who is mechadesh, who renews the world. What the Ramban here is also explaining is the mechanism of a miracle. Every moment is a brand new creation. The idea that God created once and then went away, the Ramban is saying that's not how we believe. God is continuously and continually renewing Genesis, renewing the world. So a mechanism of a miracle is that 1 second God creates the water as water. And the next second, God creates the water again as water, and then again as water, and then again as water, continuously for 1,000 years. And then God says, okay, the next creation of the water will be blood. And suddenly it's all blood. That's the mechanism of a miracle. And God knows, and God oversees, and God is all-powerful, omnipotent. Once you have a miracle, you cannot challenge these incontrovertible facts. That is a miracle. And then he adds, when the miracle is foretold ahead of time by a prophet, Moshe comes and says, tomorrow this is going to happen, tomorrow that's going to happen, and so on. Well, another element of faith, the principle of prophecy, is also substantiated by the miracle. So it's amazing. With one miracle, you have this tremendously powerful device. It alone can completely thoroughly dispel all heresy, and thoroughly substantiate all faith, all of Torah. That's what a miracle does. Pretty powerful. The Exodus was a series of miracles. And if you look at how the Torah itself describes the purpose of these miracles, it's to dispel every element of heresy. Chapter 8, verse 18. Pharaoh's told, Lema'an teda, so you know that I am God in the midst of the land. God's not in the heavens, moved on to bigger and better things. He didn't abandon his creation. That's what some heretics think, but now you see that he's evolved. Chapter 9, verse 29. Laman teda, so you know, ki lahashem haaretz. God owns the land. He is renewing it continuously. 9:14. Ba'avur teda, so you know, ki ein kamoni, there's no one like God in the entire land. He has all the power. He is the master of all. He has total dominion. There's nothing that is inhibiting or preventing God from doing what he wants. The Egyptians, they were heretics. They rejected these principles. Maybe they rejected it. Maybe they were unsure about it. They weren't convinced. And now we have these miracles. And these are signs. These are witnesses, true witnesses in faith. In faith in God, the creator of all, and in his Torah. So Ramban gives us a history of heresy. The purpose of a miracle is to dispel all of that, and that's what happened at the Exodus. But what does this have to do with us? These events are thousands of years old. Today, we're engaged with these events. And how does it relate to mitzvos? How is this supposed to impact our lives today? That's the next part of the essay. Says the Ramban. God doesn't perform these miracles on demand. Every wicked person, every heretic could say, oh, show me a sign. That's not how it works. I had a friend who once told me, if I see the bayou split right now, I'll believe in God. That's not how it works. A miracle proves a reality. And it proves it convincingly. It's up to us to perpetuate that faith. So we're commanded to remember it. Make a sign for what you saw. Transmit it to your children, and your children to their children, and their children to the next generation, up to the final generation. God doesn't do this all the time. That's not the system. The system is you cannot compel a miracle to happen. In order for us to maintain that fire of faith that we absorbed at the Exodus, we're commanded right after the Exodus. Make an adornment on your head. Write this and put it on your head at all times. And put it by your heart at all times. And say it every single morning and every single night. And have 7 days of immersion in this twice a year. And every single week you revisit it. And you tell the story. And there are so many mitzvos that orient around this. This is a watershed moment in all of human history. Because everyone who was present, everyone who witnessed it, knows for sure all the principles of faith. God exists, all-knowing, all-caring, all-powerful. Oh, and he also communicates with prophets. That was accepted by everyone. God's not going to do this all the time. This is a one-time event. Yeah, there are other miracles as well, but this is it. This is the foundational miracle. And therefore, the Almighty instituted so many different ways for us to pass this forward, to perpetuate it, to relive it. We're commanded to never forget it. This must never depart our purview. My grandfather used to tell a story of Rabbi Israel Salanter. He once went to an inn, a tavern, and he found the Jewish owner of the tavern who had become weakened in his faith. And the reason why is because he once had a visitor who was a mastil. A mastil is a Jewish person who's saying, I'm rejecting the religion. And this person took non-kosher meat and he put it by his mouth and said, if God exists, I should die on the spot when I eat this non-kosher meat. And he swallowed the whole piece of meat. Nothing happened to him. And this innkeeper couldn't believe it. How's that possible? Why didn't God kill him on the spot? So he started to waffle in his faith. And Rabbi Israel Salanter was there visiting, talking to this person. And as they're chatting, the innkeeper's daughter shows up. And she was showing the great rabbi her certificate that she became a maestro in the piano. And he says, okay, well, why don't you play a song for me? And she was a little bit embarrassed. This great rabbi's there. Maybe some of their students were there as well. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want to perform. And he said to them, no, I know how to do it. You can see the certificate. You can see the certificate. So Rabbi Israel said to the father, you see, your daughter answered your question. We have a certificate. The certificate is called the Exodus. And God doesn't have to always perform for every yokel, as they say. Every guy who wants to complain and say, prove me, do a miracle for me, do Exodus for me. Split the sea for me. Turn the bayou into blood for me. Doesn't work like that. We have a certificate. You go visit the physician. How do you know this is a legitimate physician? Well, they were tested. They were approved by how do you know? Well, there's a certificate. You can rely on that. But who's to say, how do we know? Well, they were once challenged. They went to the schooling and they went to the rigorous testing. And that's enough for us to rely upon it subsequently. It was proven that they were capable of this profession. They have the aptitude for it. They went through the training for it. And that's perpetuated by the certificate. We too. We had a complete and total education in faith. And the Torah tells us the story in great detail. Every element of faith the nation absorbed. And afterwards, we're given a certificate, not just one certificate, many, 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 many certificates to relive it and to remember it and to retell it and to never forget it. And it's so important for us to remember it that we have commandments that have outrageous degrees of severity to it. For example, 7 days of Passover, 8 in the diaspora. We don't need a single bit of leavened bread. Why? Because the nation, when Egypt left so fast, it was so miraculous, and their dough had no time to rise, to become leavened. If someone, God forbid, were to eat even one crumb of chametz on Passover, they're violating a very serious law. Someone eats chametz, the Torah tells us, they are disenfranchised from the people. They have a bag of pretzels, and they're out. And it seems very severe. Come on. It was kosher food. So it was Passover, so what? Well, the Ramban's telling us it's so important, so critical, because this is so foundational. And if you're not going to do those mitzvahs that retell, that continue, that perpetuate this beacon of faith that we absorbed, well, you're going to be out on your own. You're going to be disenfranchised. The paschal lamb. It's the one positive mitzvah. That and circumcision. One of two positive mitzvos that carry with it the penalty of disenfranchisement, of spiritual excision, of kares. Why? Because it's so important. You have to write it and put it on your arm, and write it and put it on your head, and write it and put it in every doorpost in your house. So you're constantly surrounded by this. And every morning, you tell over the story. You enunciate it with your mouth. And every night, you once again tell it over. And you never forget it all the days of your life. And you sit in the sukkah, says the Ramban, for 7 days a year. 8 in the diaspora. You literally move out of your house to remember it. This is just a sample, but there are many, many mitzvos that serve as a zecher liyetzias Mitzrayim, as a remembrance for the Exodus. And all of it is to serve for us as a witness, to retell and perpetuate the story, so they shall never be forgotten. And there should not be any opening, any wiggle room for any heretic to repudiate faith. And you can see what a fascinating and well-structured essay that Ramban here is telling us. And he continues. He's going to broaden the aperture even further. And there's some very iconic lines upcoming. If someone buys a mezuzah, it's the most basic Jewish activity that someone can do. You buy a mezuzah, how much does it cost? The prices have gone up recently. It's $100 a mezuzah, maybe $150. You want a really nice one. But you buy a mezuzah, it's affordable to most people. If it's not, well then, you can buy a cheaper one. And if you can't even afford that, send me an email. I'll send you one in the mail. rabbi@wolbajima.com. But you procure a mezuzah. And you put it on your doorpost. And you actually for a second think about what you're doing. What am I doing? I'm taking what the Torah tells us, these 2 paragraphs in the Torah, and I'm putting them on my doorpost. You do that one mitzvah, you have already acknowledged the legitimacy, the veracity of faith in God, and knowledge of God, and God's oversight and prophecy. All corners of Torah with one mitzvah. And beyond that, he adds another point. The Exodus not just proves all elements of faith and dispels all elements of heresy, it adds more things. It shows God's kindness and benevolence. He took us out of Egypt, out of slavery, and brought us to freedom. And he rewarded our ancestors. That's the power of a single mitzvah. A single mezuzah on your doorpost. It's an encapsulation of every part of faith. And the Ramban expands the aperture yet further. Every single mitzvah is precious. Even a mitzvah that's not related to the Exodus per se. You have a mitzvah that's not directly connected to the Exodus. We have to pursue it tenaciously, doggedly, as if it was a very stringent mitzvah. Because every single mitzvah is cherished, is desirable, because they all contain an element of faith. What the Ramban is telling us over here is that every mitzvah exists on 2 planes, on 2 fronts. You have the mitzvah itself, and what the message of the mitzvah is, or maybe some of the messages of the mitzvahs that we can absorb. But every single mitzvah contains within it a modicum, a dose of faith. I am doing this because I'm accepting the dominion of God. I'm accepting everything that is included in that. I'm believing in the Torah. I'm believing in prophecy. I'm believing in the all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipotent God who created the world, who oversees the world, who runs the world, who knows what's happening, who cares. Every single mitzvah has a dose of that. Even a minor, so to speak, mitzvah is an affirmation of that faith. And that's why our sages tell us, be very careful. Be fastidious, meticulous, scrupulous in the observance of a lenient mitzvah as you would by a stringent mitzvah. Because every single mitzvah is a person connecting with and developing a relationship with and acknowledging their God. Again, you have to listen to these statements. They're so powerful. V'kavanas kol mitzvos, and the intention, the objective of all the mitzvos are that we believe in God, and we acknowledge Him, and we appreciate Him that He created us. And this is the purpose of all the mitzvos, but the Ramban tells us it's the purpose of all of creation. Why did God create existence? It's a serious question. The whole purpose is that God creates us and gives us Torah and mitzvos so that we can acknowledge Him. We could know Him. We could have a relationship with Him. We could appreciate Him. The Almighty wants only one thing of us. Ultimately, all the mitzvos are all instruments, vehicles of faith. This is the famous Talmud. The Talmud tells us that you could distill all of Torah, all 630 mitzvos, into one. A life of faith, a life of connection, a bond with our Creator. And this is the reason why we pray in a synagogue with a loud voice. And this is why we have synagogues. And this is why we get together in a quorum. We have a place where we gather, we coalesce, so we can all together acknowledge God who created us, who brought us into existence. And we could publicly declare, we are your subjects. We are your creations. And he ends off with yet another amazing idea. We learned about miracles. There was heresy, all types of heresy. And a miracle comes and just trounces it all with one fell swoop, decapitates all heresy. And in their place installs all elements of faith. But there's another very subtle consequence of a miracle. What's a miracle? A miracle is God superseding what we call nature. There's water, and water's just water. You can freeze it, turn it to frozen water. You could make it into vapor, make it into gaseous water. But water is water is water. And suddenly water is blood, something else. The fish are all dead. There's nothing to drink. The stench, the effluvious stench, affects the entire land, blankets all of Egypt. And this tells us all these amazing lessons. It shows us about faith and belief in God and prophecy when it's foretold by a prophet. But there's something else that we wouldn't even consider that comes out of a miracle. If there is a miracle, well, I know existence of God, and God knows, and God oversees, and God cares, and God has all the power. But what about when there's no miracle? So there is a miracle, but what about when there is no miracle? When someone is shown a miracle, they learn not only about the miracle, but they learn about the non-miraculous times. Who is making the non-miracle? Who is effectuating ordinary times, non-miraculous times? A miracle is just one way of God saying, I'm running the show. But a non-miracle is just another way of the same thing. When there's no miracle, it's also a miracle. It's just a hidden miracle. This is the very famous framing of the Ramban. There's revealed miracles, there's hidden miracles, but there's just miracles. All of our existence is all a miracle. It's just that 99.99% of the time, it's hidden miracles. And that one time where we see the revealed miracles, we learn, we can extrapolate from that, we can reverse engineer from that all the non-miraculous times are also miracles, just miracles of a different variety, hidden versus revealed miracles. I imagine, if you're listening to this, your heart pumped recently. How'd that happen? Well, we say, the heart it's a muscle and it just contracts and it pumps the blood all over the body. And that just happened until you die. The Ramban saying, no, it doesn't just happen. It's a miracle. The Almighty is constantly renewing all of Genesis. He's renewing everything at all times. And therefore he's telling your heart, pump. Again. Well, if you're very healthy and you're very fit, it might be only 40 times a minute. And if you're super agitated, it might be a little higher. But everything that happens, all the synapses that are flying off in your brain, all that's a miracle. Every time you're able to move and think and walk and a grass grows, all that's a miracle. Every drop of rain is a miracle. Everything that happens, it's all miracles. It's just that it's hidden miracles. Because it's continuous miracles of the same variety, we don't notice it. That's okay. But once there is a departure from that, you see a revealed miracle, you will learn about the other times that they're also miracles, just miracles of a hidden variety. That's what the Ramban tells us. From the revealed miracles that are publicized from the Exodus, we can learn about the hidden miracles, which are, again, the words of the Ramban, Yesod HaTorah Kula, the foundation of all of Torah. Again, I got to read it to you because it's very powerful. A person has no portion in all of Torah until they believe that there's no such a thing as nature. Nature doesn't exist. It's just miracles. Everything is miracles. Some are revealed miracles and some are hidden miracles, but they're all miracles. There's no such a thing as just nature taking its course. Nature is a common miracle, but it's a miracle no less than a revealed miracle. Everything, good or bad, it's all a miracle. The oversight of God is complete, is never ending, is continuous. Miracles all the way down. The Exodus is a watershed moment of our nation, of our people, of our faith. But it's really the event of all of history, where God's saying, okay, I want this people, and I want to prove forevermore that all of the heresy, of all the different varieties of heresy that were instituted, that were developed in the times of Enosh with the advent of idolatry, it's all a bunch of bunk. Malarkey. It's all baloney. And that's what one miracle does. And we are commanded to perpetuate that and to appreciate the implications of that and to revisit it morning and night and have festivals around it, to never forget it. Because God doesn't just do it at will. There's miracles all the time. Hidden miracles, revealed miracles. But most of the time it's hidden miracles. And we have to have that touch point with the revealed miracle, because that instantly substantiates everything, which is the goal of our existence, the goal of Torah, the goal of our created existence is that a human who can reject God and can develop all sorts of ideas about heresy instead chooses to accept God, to believe in God, to acknowledge God who created him. The Exodus forever changed everything. And we will never, ever forget it. We'll bind it to our heads, to our brains, to our arms, to our hearts, relive it, revisit it, retell the story forever and ever. This is the Ramban, an amazing comment at the end, the last verse of our Parsha. I think it's undeniably the most famous comment of his in the whole Torah. And again, my grandfather Mary said, this you have to know by heart, because it's so foundational. And now we know why. I thank you for listening to this. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. We've learned some fundamentals, foundations of faith. And send me an email if you like it. If you didn't like it, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.